Welcome. I'm Rielly Karsh.
I'm Tovah Copan.
We are thrilled to bring you the We Go Boldly podcast.
Let's talk big burning questions, life changes, and maybe a bit of personal business.
Let's be bold and brave together. Are you ready?
I am. Here comes the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to We Go Boldly, the podcast. We are, as always, so very excited to have you with us. I usually say thrilled. I don't know what happened there. I am thrilled.
She's not at the level of thrilled today, apparently.
I'm very happy. I don't know what happened. No, I am excited to have all of you guys with us today. We're still getting adjusted to being on camera, so bear with us, all of our new YouTube subscribers. We are thrilled to have you all following us and sharing in this adventure with us at We Go Boldly. We're excited for this new aspect of our journey, but on to exciting and important news. This is, as you all know, season 6, and we are talking all about busyness, self-worth, and everything in between. And today we are going to dive into the deep and meaningful topic of self-worth versus self-esteem, and kind of what does all that mean. Before we get into the meat of that, I am, of course, going to welcome my fantastical, amazing, wonderful, all the superlatives you could think of, co-host Tovah to the show. How are you today, Tovah? What's shaking?
I am excited to be here. I'm doing well. This is a busy week. And I know we just talked about busyness, and I'm really glad that we're having these conversations because it's making me like drill down into, okay, we're busy, but we don't have to feel the frenetic madness of busyness. And so I'm glad we're having these conversations because this week is legitimately busy. And, I'm just trying to stay calm, stay at peace. Enjoy the moments while I can. And I think that this time of year, especially if you're a parent, is a weirdly busy year. You finally got into the groove of the school year and they're like, and now we have all of the end of the year stuff for you. And you're just like, oh, well, okay.
Right. All the end of year stuff in the middle of the workday. Like,
right. You don't need to work for the next 4 weeks, do you?
No, not at all.
No.
But yeah, it's this concept of being able to stay present in the midst of the frenetic pace of life. Which is something we're going to keep talking about throughout the season. Today, though, we are focusing on sort of the second half of the conversation, and that is self-worth. And it's something that Tovah and I have talked about, I don't know, for months, years. I don't know. I feel like you and I have known each other our whole lives, and we haven't. So I feel like you and I have been talking about this since we were babies, but that has not been actually happening. We have, however, been having this discussion in between the two of us for a long time because it's just such an important piece of the puzzle, right? Where do we derive our self-worth from? How do we even know how we feel about ourselves? And like back up the truck, like, what is self-worth? What does it mean? How is it different from self-esteem? And it is different from self-esteem. So let's sort of lay the groundwork of what all of that is and what it means, and then dive into the topic as we like to do. So Tovah, why don't you take over and sort of differentiate for everyone listening between self-esteem and self-worth? I usually love to do the definitions, but I'm turning it over to you today
Excellent.
to
Well,
do this one.
And, you know, I think the reason we feel like we've been talking about it our whole lives, despite not knowing each other our whole lives, is that this is often something that you learn as a child, and like you learn what self-worth is, or at least what the definition for the people around you of self-worth is. And so it is a conversation. It's a hard thing to learn and to unlearn. And so let's learn together. But first, starting with the definition of self-worth, it is a sense of one's own value as a human being, right? So
super light.
Yeah, no big deal. No big deal.
Nothing major.
Just like the foundation of all the things.
Right.
And probably honestly, the concerns that we have talked about over the last year and a half of this podcast, a lot of them can come from not having that foundation of self-worth. And I was reading an article somebody wrote, and she was like, yeah, I struggled with self-worth. So I just decided I'll be perfect and that will fix it. And I was like, oh, I see you, friend. But another part of the definition, and I like this one as well, a feeling that you are a good person who deserves to be treated with respect. Like, and I think that is the important thing about self-worth is that feeling that you are, for using the own word in a definition, but worthy, right? You are worthy of love. You are worthy of being valued. You are worthy of respect. And that is not related to anything that you have ever done, right? Like anything you ever will do, how big your goals are, how big your bank account is. It is just the baseline. And I've seen it described as the foundation, right? It is I like this, this description of it is the trunk and the roots. And then self-esteem are like the branches. And we differentiate between self-esteem and self-worth, but I think it's really important to know that a lot of people don't differentiate between them. So if you are reading an article, you stumble upon something in a magazine, and it sounds like they're talking about self-esteem when they say worth or vice versa, just know that I read a number of articles where like, we use these terms interchangeably. And I just wanted to be like, but they're not interchangeable, right? So, self-esteem is what we think and feel and believe about ourselves, right? Whereas self-worth is recognizing, and I'm quoting a Dr. Christina Hibbert with this, I am greater than all those things, right? It is a deep knowing that I am of value, that I am lovable, necessary to life, and of incomprehensible worth. And self-esteem is like at that next level, that we believe in ourselves, that we feel good about ourselves. And so they're not the same thing. And then self-confidence is like, the next level. And we're not talking about self-confidence today. But self-worth is that really, like she said, that deep knowing that you are good enough and that you are enough.
Right. Just for your existence, just because you are here on the planet and breathe and live and move about your day and exist in general. I think one of the interesting things about self-worth is that when we were doing a workshop the other day and somebody asked us about your inner voice, and they asked us, well, okay, what is your inner voice? Just like your emotions? Is it just, is it an actual voice? Is it, which essentially is your inner monologue, right? Like the noise you hear in your own head, which most people have, right? Most of us have that inner monologue going of like, oh, I forgot to turn off the stove, or, oh, I forgot to like put my kids' lunch in their lunchbox, or whatever it is. And that is not technically your inner voice, right? That's just the running noise in your head of like your day and things things you got to do. Yeah. But your inner voice is very connected to your feelings of self-worth. It's very much rooted in that same concept of knowingness, of connection to oftentimes something, this concept of something greater than you, but it's also this larger, this sort of larger than an individual sense, right? Your self-esteem is very individual. It's very much just about you.
Right.
Your self-worth is larger. You can look at other people and understand they are worthwhile, right? Like that they exist and therefore deserve to be alive. Whereas you're not going to look at them and necessarily think about their self-esteem. But their worthwhileness as humans, you probably, if you took the time, would think about. So it's a larger concept. It's a broader scope, and it ripples out in that way. And so that's why it's the base, it's the foundation. It's something bigger than just you as an individual. It's your connection to the whole. And even if you don't believe in God, even if you don't believe in anything bigger than you, it's whether you like it or not, it is still your connection to other people around you. We're all worthwhile for, just because we exist.
Yeah, and I think that's important. If you don't believe in the God or universe, the universe, or recognizing that you are a worthwhile part of this larger global community.
Right.
Yeah, and I think the way I think about it too is like looking at other people. Like there are people that I don't necessarily get along with, or not even not get along with, but like that I don't want to hang out with because our personalities are not the same and we have different interests. My judging of their worthiness has nothing to do with that. Like, I think that they are worthy. They are worth, their existence is important. And I can see their role as being important in the larger community. Even if I don't want to hang out with them, right? So it like sometimes it's easier to see things when you're talking about other people. And so just like they have a very important role in the world, even if we wouldn't be BFFs, like I do too, right? And it is not related to what I achieve, if I can tell a funny joke, if I, what I look like, none of those things, which is interesting because when we started looking at and researching how people do measure their self-worth, it is entirely related to all of these things that come after just that deep knowing that you are deserving and of value. And you're going to hear us say this like for the next, I don't know, however long this episode is going to be, we're going to kind of say the same things over and over again, because it is so important that we understand this and understand that we have this value, because if we attach it to other things that we are either not in control of, or and very, very few things we are actually in control of, or
Yes.
if we attach it to things that that even if we are in control of, don't bring us peace or contentment or happiness, then it's hard. And I think it's particularly important to realize that for many of us, and for many people, this is unlearning something that you have felt like you've known your whole life, right? So if you're walking down the street and you see self-esteem and self-worth is interchangeable, and you have lived a life where achievement is where you find your self-esteem, which is another whole other issue, but like, let's say it's achievement, then you only think that you have value. You only have self-worth if you are continually trying to achieve. And whether that is a big life to-do list or a little tiny task list from every day, either way, it is exhausting. So we might be repetitive on this episode, but it's because we have one thing we want to drive home. And with that, we actually need to take a quick break, but we can maybe come back and talk a little bit about what people do measure how people often measure their self-worth. Because I think this is one of those things that's sometimes easier to explain, like what you shouldn't be doing than what you know, conceptually than what you should be doing. So we will come back after a quick break.
Hey, Tovah, you know what I love?
Coffee, definitions, uninterrupted reading time.
Okay, all of those things are true, but I also love maps.
As in Siri, take me to the beach.
Yeah, also as in who am I really and who do I want to be?
Yeah, I figured that's what you meant, but I also have the beach on my mind. So,
Well, we were talking about things we love, so that definitely makes sense. But the map I was thinking about is our Defining You course.
yes, we put together Defining You as a way to map where you are and how you want to live your life.
So true. So many people struggle to find their purpose in a busy and noisy world.
That's why we made Defining You, our course meant to guide you to creating your own mission statement.
And there's good news. You can get it now on teachable.com. Find the link on our website at goboldlyinitiative.com/courses, or check out the link on our Instagram bio at Go Boldly Together.
We can't wait to see you there. Now, let's head back to the show. Okay. So welcome back. I will get the ball rolling and then hand it back to you, Rielly. But people measure self-worth often the way they might measure self-esteem. They aren't walking around with that deep knowing. And so they're measuring it by their appearance, right?
Yeah.
What they look like, the number on the scale, all of these other things. They might be measuring it by their bank account, right? So those two things are some very important ways that people measure their self-esteem, but really measure their self-worth. Like how worthy am I of love, of, you know, am I enough? And it's like, well, let me check what my bank says. It's like, well, that doesn't make any sense.
Well, yeah, I think, you know, so I don't know historically when it became the case that people conflated their value or the value of their existence on the planet or, you know, in life with their productivity. And we'll talk about that in another episode in more detail, but, you know, or their appearance, you know, in whatever era it is. Obviously the type of appearance changed, but it's still tied to something material, right? Something superficial, something about how you look, how much money you have, what kind of car you drive, what your job is, what you achieve in life. And all of these things became the determining factor of how valuable you are in society. And that determined your worth. That put you in the social structure. And I think so much of that has to do with the way in which our social hierarchy forms, and the way in which our governments work and our cultures formed and all of those things. And a lot of it's about safety and keeping ourselves. I'm going too far into, you know, sociology, but it is unfortunately not determinative of our value as humans, right? It's not determinative of whether or not we deserve to be treated with respect. It's not determinative of whether or not we deserve to be happy or content or satisfied or loved or treated with kindness. None of those things have anything to do with our value as people. They have nothing to do with any of that. And yet we have conflated the term so deeply, and it is so ingrained in our culture that so often we forget. And and it's, and it's become almost a sickness, right? Like it is so hard to look at yourself in the mirror and not see those things and not feel those feelings. I mean, and it starts very early. It starts in childhood, and it starts in family systems. And it's not necessarily even conscious, right? It's not necessarily even something that people are aware that they're doing to themselves or their kids or their neighbors or whoever. And unfortunately, that conflation of terms has resulted in, I think a lack of self-worth in a lot of people. And when you lack self-worth, you lose a lot of grounding. You lose a lot of sense of connection to your communities, yourself, to the universe, to God, to whatever it is that you want to think about. And without that sense of grounding, you are, you're kind of free floating. You're a little bit lost. And that loss of sense of self leads to just this endless cycle, right? You're constantly cycling and you're thinking, okay, well, I have to get the next thing. I have to get the next thing in order to feel better, to keep looking for the next, I need another car. I need another job. I need more money and all of these things in order to feel better, because I'm trying to fill this void of self-worth. But you cannot fill that hole of self-worth with things outside of yourself. It just doesn't work.
Well, and it also can lead us down some pretty dark roads where we don't think that we're deserving of love, or this is the best job I can get, right? This is the and you are okay with people treating you poorly. You're okay with people in relationships treating you poorly because you don't think that you have inherent self-worth. And so you aren't demanding that people treat you as a good person deserving of being treated with respect, which is the definition of self-worth, right? Or one of them. And I think that it can lead us, making a lot of bad decisions on behalf of ourselves because we don't think that we're deserving of other things. And so this is where it becomes so important. And then for all of the other larger ramifications that you talked about, which is, legislation is written in ways that judges people differently based on all of these other factors. News coverage is, I was having a conversation with my son the other day, and now about how in the 80s there were always kids on milk cartons, and like we really thought that like kids were like kidnapped all the time,
right,
by like strangers. Like we just thought it happened like all the time, by random strangers in vans. And
constantly, I'm still afraid of vans. I will not park near a van ever.
Well, because they could grab you at any minute
time
and offer you candy first, of course, which
obviously
you should say no to. And I told him, like, it is still important for you not to get in a stranger's van. And it is still important for you not to take stranger candy from a stranger. Like, these are all still good rules to follow as a child, but like you will not. And I said, the fact is that it is so rare for a child to be kidnapped. And then I said that it becomes a big news story. And then I said, well, it's rare for a cute, white, rich child to be kidnapped. And that becomes the news story, right? Like even our news coverage judges people on appearance, their net worth, their skin color, like a variety of things. And so we get those messages all day long.
Yes.
Which is why it is so important for us to take time as individuals, whatever that looks like, to make sure that we are really tapping into or that we really believe deep in our inner knowing that we have value and that we are worthy.
The other reason, even beyond for ourselves, because once you've done that, right? Like once you have sort of sunk into that feeling of self-worth and you recognize that your own value is intrinsically there, then it goes outward. you'll see the value in other people, and you'll recognize that everyone else has value, even as you were saying before, Tovah, the people you don't particularly like. And that is mind-blowing. I mean, I say that as a person who, can like look at a lot of people and be like, I don't want to hang out with you. We have very different beliefs and they're not jiving. And so we're not going to like hang out and drink tea and have a conversation about this right now. But that doesn't diminish my thought process about their worthwhileness as human beings on the planet, right? Because I know if they're not worthwhile, I'm not worthwhile, right? Like it is necessary to be able to look at yourself and go, okay, I'm human. I'm part of the universe. I'm part of this collective energy that exists in the world. And now I know I'm getting all wooey on everyone, but that's where my spirituality comes from. But I'm part of that collective experience. And so if I'm worthwhile, all these other energetic beings are also worthwhile. And however you look at it, whatever your background is, it's the same. You just might have different words for it. And I cannot dismiss those people as people worth, deserving of respect and deserving of existence and humanity.
Right.
And that's so important.
And I think this is also the difference between, separating esteem and worth and confidence, because there are people that I don't respect.
Absolutely.
But not at, like, let's be very, very clear. And all I keep thinking of is January 6th. Like, right? Like, there are people that I do not like. I do not respect. Decisions that they make, but as a human being, I do respect that they exist.
Right.
And because of that, they are worthy of existence. Like, and so I think that, like you said, it's important to know that difference for yourself, because it's also changes how you interact with other people. And I will say this is one of those very few things. So working on self-esteem is an ongoing process, right? Even remembering to value yourself. I mean, I write, I am enough in my journal every single day, and that I am enough just as I am. Those are things that you have to work on. But I will say that in this case, just being like, oh, I believe this definition of self-worth. I am buying into this, and this is what I believe. That only has to happen one time. And that's kind of nice, because so much that we do is like, well, you got to keep working on it. You got to keep working on it. And you do have to remind yourself, but it is so nice, and it can be freeing to accept this definition and accept yourself as worthy of everything, love, respect, being enough. And so even when I'm struggling, right, I can fall back on this definition of self-worth and go, oh, that's right. I'm here. And so I am worthy. And that is it. That is it.
Because you're worthy on your absolute worst day. You're worthy when you've done something horrible, right? Like when you have made your biggest mistake, when you have failed at something, when you have hurt somebody's feelings, when, you've had like a major mom fail. I don't know, when you have been fired. Right. Like you're still worthy. And that's the difference that we're talking about. This is what self-worth is about. It's that it never goes away. It never leaves you, and it will never let you go. Right. It's one of those things that exists all the time, forever. You're always worthwhile, and you cannot lose it once you recognize it. Right. Like once you accept it. Exactly. And it's something that you have to be willing to embrace, even in your like I keep wanting to swear. I'm sorry, everybody. Even in your like darkest, and that's why I keep pausing. Even in your darkest days, I know, potty mouth today. Even in your darkest days, you have to recognize like, okay, I'm having like the worst day. I'm super depressed. I feel terrible about myself. My self-esteem is in the garbage, and I've been there, but that doesn't change the fact that you're still a worthwhile human.
Right. And you read stories, you read memoirs of people. And this is one reason I love to read memoirs, but like, I read a story and I cannot think of the name of it. I'm struggling. I can see the front of the book.
Oh no.
But it was the story of, he was a not guilty man who was in jail and he was eventually exonerated. But I feel like even if he was guilty, right, because he was guilty of other things, he just wasn't guilty of murder.
Right.
He had that knowing sense of worth, of humanness, right? And he knew he was deserving of being treated with respect as a human being, no matter the worst decisions on his worst days. And I think sometimes when you read somebody like that, or you meet somebody, you've met this person because they accept themselves. And we talk a lot about accepting who we are, right? And knowing that we are who we are on our worst day and our best day. But this idea of your having worth doesn't change at any point. There's no day that you're more worthy,
right,
or less worthy. I think we need to take another quick break. And then I'd like to just talk about, I said we would, and I don't think we did, but things that you definitely shouldn't measure your self-worth on. So I think we've been very clear about what it is, but maybe we can go through a few things about, like, just in case you were wondering, don't do this. Yes. And then maybe before we go, we can talk about some things that you can do to help sort of, if you're like, yeah, Rielly, Tovah, I got this. I believe your definition, but things you can do to kind of cement that in yourself, because it is a process. But we'll be right back. Know what I really love to do?
Take baths, go for walks, read, drink margaritas, hike.
Yeah, not what I was referring to. We're recording a commercial right now.
I do, but I'm thinking outside the box, being adaptable.
As I was saying, what I love to do is host our live monthly workshops.
Oh, right. That's what we were talking about. Me too. They are a lot of fun to put together and host every month. And we can bring margaritas, so...
Join us for live conversation as we get a bit deeper into topics near and dear to our hearts. We go through everything from self-care to setting boundaries.
We share coaching tips, practical advice, and take questions from the audience. It's a whole lot of fun.
Sign up for our newsletter today at goboldlyinitiative.com/contact to make sure you hear about all the upcoming Go Boldly workshops.
You definitely don't want to miss out. Now, back to that show.
Okay, well, welcome back. We are going to talk a lot more about this through the whole season, but number one thing you shouldn't measure your self-worth against: your to-do list. So I'll just throw that out there. We don't even go into it. We're going to talk about it. But that is like top of the list. Your productivity, your to-do list, that has nothing to do with your self-worth. And
so sorry. That's a good one. Your social media following, also not a good one. Your age. I'm not sure why that's even on the list.
I don't know, but I love it. Because our country does a really good job of telling people of a certain age on both ends of the spectrum that their opinions don't matter.
That's true. I can never remember my age, so I guess I didn't buy into that.
Someone asked me my age yesterday, and it took me a very long time to get there.
I confidently say the wrong age on multiple occasions. So don't ask me my age. And it's not because I'm embarrassed. It's because I legitimately don't remember.
I love it.
Tovah knows I have a terrible memory. Let's see. Oh, this is an interesting one. How far you can run. Your mile run time is one of the least important factors for your self-worth. That's good news.
I love it.
Mine is terrible.
The number of friends you have.
Yeah.
And we love friends. And we've done whole episodes on how important friendship and belonging is. But the number of friends you have does not determine what your self-worth is.
No.
Also your relationship status. Another one.
Yep.
One I liked that I thought this was so interesting was your likes. I thought this was really interesting because it talks about whether you have, quote, like good taste, or whether people think you're sophisticated, or you have an eye for the finer things. Like, that doesn't matter. You're allowed to like what you like.
I appreciate that one.
I really did too. I was like, oh, I need to work on this. Maybe I need to come to terms with things I like and don't like.
Right.
What else? We're obviously going through some lists that we
we're going through. We have several lists happening here. Your grades.
Ooh, yeah.
Should you still be in school? Your money, how much you have or don't have.
Yeah.
Which I think is self-explanatory. I think that's the entire list. Did we miss anything?
There's one that's my favorite, which is anything or anyone but yourself.
Yes.
I was like, I mean, that could just, we could sum it up in that, but I just love that, right?
Yeah.
You are worthy and valuable. If you believe you're worthy and valuable, you're worthy and valuable. Even if you don't believe you're worthy and valuable, you are worthy and valuable. Full stop. And if you're wondering, if it hasn't jumped out at you so far, whether you have self-worth, low self-worth, not whether you actually have low self-worth, but whether you think you have low self-worth, I think it's really helpful to just take time to be aware of the thoughts that you're having. And if what we're saying is making you cringe, that could be a heads up that this is something that you need to work on and to really accept that you are worthy. And what's interesting is I think that a lot of kid shows now, like, they do want to emphasize this, right? And worthiness. I don't know, other than Mr. Rogers and maybe Sesame Street, I don't know how many kid shows were doing that when we were kids.
Yeah, I don't think so. It was not the focus for sure.
Right.
But we grew up in the achievement era. So
apparently. But I think that, one thing to be aware of, because there's lots of patterns that will detract from this knowing that you have. And a lot of it has to do with negative thought tracks.
Yeah. And this is where that inner monologue can actually become helpful, right? If your inner monologue is constantly mean, right? If that voice in your head, and this isn't even your inner voice, if it's just the inner monologue is saying not nice things to you all the time, or even telling you your to-do list, but like in a really mean way, or adding mean words to it, that's a good sign that something isn't tracking in a great way for you. That should be a red flag. And I think you should probably pay attention to it and see maybe what's going on inside you to cause that to happen. And you don't have to live like that. There's no reason that you should spend your life being mean to yourself. So many people do, and it's just not necessary.
Right.
So, and another thing is, and I find this in my kids sometimes, and I used to have this, I used to struggle with this as well, but this sort of all or nothing thinking, the black and white thinking. And it's something I actually wound up working on a lot in therapy. And it's this idea that something is always, if you find yourself saying always, forever, never, all the time, if those are words that are in your vocabulary, or in your sentences a lot, that's also a red flag, because it's just not accurate. it's so rare that something is always all the time forever. As we've talked about extensively on the show, change is constant. And so those things are usually red flags that, something is not clicking for you, that you're getting stuck in a pattern of thought processing that's pretty negative and isn't necessarily healthy. So these sorts of things typically indicate that, something's going on and it's not working for you. And again, you don't have to live like that. You don't have to do that to yourself.
Yeah. And you also, this is our plug for therapy and coaching. You don't have to figure this out alone, right?
Yes.
So like, because speaking of things that we've worked on in therapy, mistaking feelings for facts.
Oh yeah. Brains are liars.
Yes. And depending on how much your brain is lying to you, it might be important for you to talk to a therapist or to go to your doctor. And that could mean depression. It could mean anxiety. So if you're at all thinking, oh yeah. And I think mistaking feelings for facts, though, that is something that my kids do. One of them has they all have big tryouts this week. All we're doing is trying out for things this week. I gotta tell you, I'm like, this is the week. And I'm just like, I am not here for this. But that feeling of I'm not good enough is actually, that's not true. Right. Like, and in my one son's case, like it's also like, he's good enough. He's also good enough at baseball. Like, and so, there's so many things that our brains tell us that are wrong, that are just straight out wrong. And so I think it is so important for us to keep an eye on that. And going back to what you said, Rielly, if you say positive things, if you switch your inner monologue around, there is less space for those negative feelings to get through. Like you can change the way your brain talks to yourself. Now, for some people, that might require therapy and medical intervention. So, and for others, it might require a couple of, cute affirmations hanging around their house. So you do have to take that time, or it could be that you need a coach who's going to hold you accountable and give you journals to, entries and all of these things, or meditations. It's the whole gamut.
Right. Or it could take all of those things, which is what it took for me. It's and that's okay too. So just to be clear, like there's no magic pill that fixes everything for everyone. So, and everyone is unique and needs something individual to them. And that's okay. That's totally normal. There's nothing wrong with that.
It goes to this concept of we're all really special and unique, and none of us are really special and unique, Right.
Right.
If you need something unique, that's incredibly normal.
Right.
I also, though, I think talking about, maybe switching to things that we can do for our self-worth. I mentioned affirmations. One thing that we both kind of got stuck on when we were reading some of the research was that as long as they're used in the right way and they're the correct affirmations, like, have you read an affirmation before where you're like, well, that's not true? And you actually feel worse after reading the affirmation than you felt before?
Yes, I have. Putting that out there.
Yeah. Like, and even a switch from I'm going to be a great success to I'm going to persevere until I succeed. Like, those are a nice little switch. And that, it's something that I see in my kids' school with the push of growth mindset, right? Some of these affirmations were clearly written like pre-growth mindset. So be aware of even the positive things that you say to yourself. If it doesn't feel good, even if you could be reading a super popular book or following a super popular person on Instagram, and you're like, this person's the best. If they say something that you're like, oh, that doesn't feel good, believe yourself. That's okay. And find something that does, or tweak it so it does feel good.
Yeah, we do it all the time. Just to be clear, like we'll back and forth between each other, and I'll say nope, or Tovah will say nope, and we'll eliminate something from an outline that we're gonna, talk to you all about. And that's, we have to gut check ourselves and make sure that what we're looking at is actually right for us. And what's right for us, might not be right for somebody else. It's individual. It's what feels right. It's what makes sense to you in the moment. And this is also a part of how we learn to trust our intuition and trust our inner voice and trust ourselves. It's a part of the process. But there are some great affirmations that are really good for helping you to kind of grow your sense of self-worth. And I use that term intentionally, your sense of self-worth, because your self-worth is there. It's your understanding of it. It's your ability to sense it. And so if that is something that you're struggling with, I think affirmations can help, or we think affirmations can help. There are a couple other things that, you can also do. And one thing that Tovah had talked about, I forget where we were talking about this, Tovah, maybe on the podcast, maybe somewhere in one of our workshops, but learning to accept compliments. And just a quick personal story. I have, growing up, I was terrible at accepting compliments because I always thought somebody was trying to trick me. I never believed them. I never thought anyone was telling me the truth. Whenever they complimented me, I assumed it was going to be like, something where they were going to then say, but you could have done this better.
You were waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Yeah, there were a variety of reasons for that. But I never took a compliment at face value. And I was always dismissive of those sorts of things. And so it just had zero impact on any of my feelings about myself, other than to make me tense and uptight and a little bit mean, to be honest. Surprise.
Well, and I think people will then think that you're like, you don't appreciate the compliment.
Absolutely. Right.
Which you're like, yeah. I just don't believe you. I appreciate it. I just don't believe you.
Right. Well, no, I didn't appreciate it at all, because I was always like, oh, what are you doing? What do you want? What's your end game? What's your agenda?
Well, and I think we were talking about it. I think it was not on the podcast or in a workshop. I think we were just talking because we do that all the time.
Right.
And I maybe was saying, we were both sharing struggles that we had like with our kids in sports. And one thing I was saying was I was trying to figure out like specific actionable items that I could encourage for my son. And one of them was just saying thank you and looking somebody in the eye when they gave you a compliment.
Yes.
But it's something that I work on too. And I have gotten better at. I have worked really hard to just say thank you and end it there, like thank you, period. And then if I do want to like, if I was working on something with other people that I want to be like, and this person was really helpful too, do that. But I think that we're so often that we want to like ignore the compliment and we feel uncomfortable with the compliment and that we want to like share it with other people really fast, that we don't let the compliment seep in on us. Right. So if it's like, Rielly, you're doing such a good job with this podcast, say, you would say thank you first. But then you could mention that you have a partner if you wanted to.
Of course. Well, one thing I've been doing and started doing several years ago, and I do this with my husband because he's a safe place to land, is if he gives me a compliment, I ask him to give me details. And this is how I get through my discomfort, right? I just make it more uncomfortable.
Love it.
Because that's how I learn to trust that it's an actual compliment and that I can, just sit in it and I can be okay with it. And so he'll say something like, that dinner was delicious or whatever. Like I actually cook, but I'm trying to think of something. And I'll say, oh, thank you. What specifically did you like about it? And then he'll have to, and I talked to him about it. I said, this is what I'm going to do so that I can start accepting compliments, and he'll tell me specifically what it is that he liked about it. And that way, it's a process for me to learn how to accept compliments. And it's just one one technique, but these are like the kinds of things that we can all start doing when we want to make changes, right? There are practical ways that we can work through these sort of hangups that we have instead of just going, oh, well, there's nothing I could do. This is just how I am, right? That's not true. Of course, there's things we can do. And even once you've been doing something for 30 years, you can make a change in your life to adapt and adjust and make it a little bit easier, a little bit better for yourself. So, and I will say that it does make a difference because now I'm less likely to dismiss somebody who compliments me. Yeah. So it's been an interesting experience. It is a little exhausting though, I'll be honest.
So, there are things, we do have a few affirmations that I think we both liked that we want to share with you. But definitely, as we're wrapping up, take the time to listen to what we're saying, because it is so important. And I know it feels uncomfortable and it goes against a lot with what many of us who are talking or listening were raised. And I don't even mean in our immediate family. I mean, in like the world has told us that this is not true. And so once you accept that it is true, then we do the work to actually feel that sense of self-worth. And like, just right off the bat, I love this affirmation. No matter what I've done or haven't done, I'm worthy of love. Boom.
Yeah. I actually really like this one. I delight in the joy of missing out.
Yes, I do. I really do.
It's like a good Friday night one.
It's like, oh, the plans were canceled. That's too bad.
Oh, that's terrible.
I'm sorry, we're introverts. What are you going to do with us?
I know, right? No, some of these are great. Like, so we will also share these.
We'll put a full list up.
We'll put a list up on our socials, and you guys can use them however you see fit. There's another one that I particularly love, and it goes, it's not about what happens, it's about how I respond to what happens. And I really, really believe that. It's easy to say, hard to do.
Well, and that goes along to my favorite, my other one that I saw here was, the story I tell about my life means everything. Because it talks about like the way you think influences how you live, just like the way you respond to something is what actually matters, right? And so much of that is, we talk all the time about how little we have control over, but we do have control about how we respond to something. And we do have control about the thoughts that are in our heads. We can take the time to make them more positive, and we can put the work in. And so recognizing that the story that you tell about your life is what matters when it comes to your sense of worthiness and a variety of other things can be really empowering when everything feels like it's out of control and you don't have a lot of control over things. So we'll definitely share a bunch of these affirmations. We share a lot of them all the time, but we'll make a point of showcasing these. But I think we're about time for homework.
Yeah, I think so.
All right. So this is going to be a journaling one. We've given you some journaling before. We do try to take breaks from journaling every once in a while. But this is a important one to talk about. And so we would like you to take the time to think, how would you describe your self-worth right now? Right. So that you can kind of have this baseline. And how did you feel about what you heard, what we talked about, right? So some further questions, if you're like, I don't know how I would describe my self-worth. I don't know. What words would you use to describe yourself? What value do you place on yourself, right? Are these positives and these negatives? But the one step further is, where does your message from worth come from? And what do you believe is the basis for your self-worth, right? Because that's kind of getting to like what's actually going on. What do you feel? So we always include all of these questions in our show notes, because this could keep you writing for a week.
Yes, for sure.
These are enough questions. So take the time, journal, reach out to your accountability partner. If you're new to us, because maybe you found us on YouTube, we talk about accountability partners a lot, and we would encourage you to find someone who also listens to the podcast, and the two of you, or watches us on YouTube, the two of you can have conversations about what we talk about. As you heard today, Rielly and I are constantly bouncing things off of each other, whether we're recording something or not. And it is incredibly helpful.
Oh my God. Yeah.
So talk about some of this with your accountability partner if you feel comfortable, or find an accountability partner. Reach out to us on social media if you have any questions. And with that, we will be back next week. Thanks so much for listening to We Go Boldly podcast. We know you're busy and we love spending time with you.
If you enjoyed this week's episode, let us know. Head to Apple Podcasts right now to rate and review our show. While you're there, be sure to click that subscribe button.
Want more us time? Follow us on all the socials at Go Boldly Together.
Want even more us time? As in all the coaching pizzazz. Find us at goboldlyinitiative.com for all the info.
We will be back with more excitement, research, and deep thoughts next week.
Until then, keep on being the bold, brave, amazing people we know you already are.